Larry is upset. See, he lost a deal because his angry part, took over. It was a very expensive deal and it's gone. Yep, parts can ruin things. But why? They mean so well. I'll explain the whole thing. I'm Dr. Deb. Hey, I'm Dr. Deb. Welcome to Situation 4 of our playlist on marriage situations. Now, you may remember last time we were talking about Larry's wife, Cheryl, and why she was getting a little frustrated with her husband not making any progress with therapy, because he's been to therapy at least 3 times, and she doesn't see a single change. Well, let's find out why exactly she's not finding any changes in Larry. So Larry comes into his next session very down. And he relates the following story to the therapist. He says, listen, I understand from our previous work together that my personality is to kind of plow through and just get things done and accomplish what I need to accomplish, because whether I like it or not, whether I like the process or not, that's what I learned to do growing up to please my father, because I just wasn't into sports, and I learned that I had to kind of do it for him because he was into sports, and I just learned to plow through. And the therapist goes, yeah, that's not your whole personality, though. That's just a part of who you are, right? I mean, when you first got married to Cheryl, you weren't really acting quite like that. And he's, yeah, that's true. Okay, so we agree it's just a part of him, but it's a big part. And here's the thing about parts. They have an agenda. Each one has a separate agenda. Unlike yourself, which we talked extensively about in the first playlist, we have The Secret to Healing Crappy Marriages. Unlike self-energy, which has a kind of a big picture look and takes into account all the different parts of you and the story that the other person is bringing to you and the whole environment and your history and everything else, your parts do not have a big picture look at anything. So your parts are just doing their job, their agenda, and they do plow through like horses with blinders on. So because parts don't have the big picture, when Larry is plowing through to try to accomplish something, he can actually end up causing the very problem that this plowing through part was trying to avoid. So anyway, to resume the story, he has this really big customer that he's had for quite some time. And this customer was about to make a multi-million-dollar deal with Larry's company, and Jim was handling it. And Jim made a mistake. So he sent a copy to Larry, and Larry then knew what the mistake was. And this part took over. And Larry said, I was furious at Jim. How could he do such a thing? He's ruining a chance of a lifetime with a customer that I have been courting for years. And I sent an explosive email to Jim, and I made sure that my customer was given a copy so that he would know I was taking care of it. And the therapist said, oh, I see. And what happened? The customer quit, Larry said. He quit. He just said, I'm not going to do business with you. And the therapist said, you mean right after receiving that letter from you, that explosive letter from you, your customer just signed off on your relationship? And Larry said, yes. I was so angry at Jim, I wanted to take his head off. I am about to fire him for this. And the therapist said, well, let's kind of take a close look at your reactions, because it seems as if the way you handled Jim is what bothered the customer. Or am I wrong? Is it something else? I mean, that's the way you said your letter caused it. Larry went silent, thinking about this. Oh, my letter. The letter in which I was so angry and assured the customer that Jim would be fired. That's exactly the opposite of what it was I was trying to accomplish, wasn't it? Yeah, said the therapist. It seems like that's what happened, Larry. How do you suppose that went down? Well, first Larry got really upset again because, again, this part does not see the big picture. Only when self glimpses through the cloud cover does the big picture come up. Only when self understands that there's more going on than this part sees, only then can Larry get the big picture. Otherwise, he's driven by this part. And the therapist's question kind of forced him to look at it for a moment. But then he backed away because that's how people are. No, it couldn't have been my letter. It was Jim's stupid mistake. And the therapist asked him, well, said the therapist, it does sound like Jim made a big mistake and made the customer feel like they weren't going to get what it was they wanted, all the bang for the buck that they wanted. I get that, but how come the customer didn't write you back an email or pick up the phone and say, well, what are you going to do about me? How are you going to correct this? And that was a really good point. Larry said, I never told the customer I would correct it. I was so mad at Jim for making the mistake. All I told the customer was that he would be fired. I never did say I would correct the mistake. I never did say that, of course, we treat our customers better than that. I didn't even apologize. How come I didn't do that? Well, the therapist explained, your reaction is a typical part, this plow through part that must get to the goal. And regardless of what's in the way, push everything else that's in the way down. Didn't think about the customer's point of view because you were all about being upset with Jim. And Larry took that in. You're right, he said. That's absolutely true. I did not think of the customer's point of view. But Larry asked, how come I didn't? Why did I do that? The therapist said, listen, this is a process of practice that you're going to need to make of getting into self-energy before you react. Because if you react automatically, I guarantee you that you're going to end up going ahead and letting your parts take over. They will. That's just how we are. It's called economy of brain power to be on automatic, right? It takes more energy to stop. And you can't really stop and think when you're all worked up. So what you really need to do, what we have to start right now, is have a relationship with your parts. This plow through part. I'm gathering this part of you must feel terrible right now. And Larry stopped and said, yes, I do feel terrible. And the therapist said, well, can you kind of imagine this plow through part sitting across from you on another chair and being just, there so that you can talk to it? And Larry said, I don't like this imagining thing. And the therapist said, of course you don't, because that's not plowing through. And as long as you're in plow through mood rather than self, which is more contemplative and willing to take a look around and get the big picture, you're not going to like it. But Larry, you've been in a lot of trouble here, and now this is a multi-million-dollar contract. I don't know which is worse, how Cheryl feels about you, how your employees feel about you. First it was Molly and now it's Jim. Or losing this contract. I don't know which is worse. But you're going to have to make some effort here to let yourself shine. So what I want for you to do right now is just separate from that part. So Larry took a moment and said, okay, I did that. And the therapist said, so how do you feel toward that part right now? He said, I'm angry with that part. That part is always causing trouble. I wish I was never going to be like that. Why did I have to grow up with that idea in my mind in the first place? And the therapist said, okay, I got where you're at here. Larry, could you ask your angry part to take a seat way over there? What do you mean way over there? Well, your angry part doesn't like this part that's been trying so hard to help you and save you your whole life, right? This angry part has been very antagonistic to everything that part has been trying to do. He said, yeah, that's right. They're like on opposite poles. And the therapist said, exactly. So let's promise the angry part we'll get back to it. We don't want it feeling like it's being ignored. It's a part of you too. It's a part of you too. But let's have it just sit over there, like over there on the other side of the room, so we can talk to and work with this part. And Larry did that. And the therapist said, are you still angry with the part that messed up by plowing through? And Larry said, no, actually. The therapist said, well, what do you feel toward this part? And he said, I'm just curious why it has to do that. And so the therapist and Larry got back into where we were in situation 2, with Larry relating once again the story of his father and how this part always needed to plow through to please his father and ignore his own feelings and therefore ignoring everyone's feelings, right? Because when you ignore feelings, you ignore everyone's feelings. And that's how he got to lack empathy in his life in general, as well as plowing through without regard for anyone, as well as being angry about the consequences that all that caused. Larry spent some time going through this whole thing one more time with the therapist, and he walked out thinking, and what will Cheryl see when he gets home? I'm sorry to tell you, Cheryl will not see changes yet. It takes a while for a person who has been acting on automatic, because that's how things work. It's, again, economy of brain, just do it automatically, to suddenly shift over all that stuff into consciousness and make it happen in front of your nose, and you're thinking about what's going to happen and sort of planning what parts of you you're not going to let take over you so that you can be in self. And at the same time, listen to the part, because the part has something valuable to say to you. Listen to your part. So it has to happen slowly. The therapy process has to happen slowly as a person gets used to shifting from automatic to making things conscious. Think of how you first learned to drive a car. But I'm seeing results as the therapist because what I'm seeing is how Larry is thinking about it and making it important. He's thinking about it. He's sitting there in my office making it important. So now the question comes up, how long will it take anyway? Let's tune in to the next episode when I bring Larry back. Hey guys, like, comment, subscribe, get notifications, but please do something for yourself. Watch my webinar where I take a deep dive into what I consider to be the only and best method of healing old trauma and new trauma that's going on in your life today. Find out why it works and how it can help you. And maybe you'll even get a chance to speak to me one-on-one.